If you're into sports, then you know a lot of historically great athletes have had amazing tributes made in their honor. These tributes usually come after they retire as a way to immortalize their greatness and basically ensure that everyone not only remembers who they were, but also what they did. Now, some people have statues built in their likeness, like Thierry Henry in front of the Arsenal Stadium, and a lot of people have things named after them. These things can range from an award, like in the NBA, we've got the Bill Russell NBA Finals MVP award. And it could also be an arena, like the Rod Laver Arena, the most iconic tennis court in the Australian Open. But sometimes people go as far as naming their kids after sports stars. Like in the Netherlands, where over 1,500 people have named their children after a guy called Jari Litmanen, who used to play for the biggest soccer club in the country. But even that is not the most extreme example of a tribute paid to an athlete. Because today, I'm telling you the story of how Michael Jordan got a disease named after him. If you have any interest in sports, then there's a good chance you know who Michael Jordan is. But in the incredibly slight chance that you don't know who he is, then I'll give you a super quick history lesson. Michael Jeffrey Jordan is quite simply one of the most accomplished athletes in all of human history. Millions of people actually think of him as the greatest basketball player of all time because he had the kind of dominant, amazing career that's gone on to become stuff of legend in the NBA. So here's a quick look at his resume as an athlete. Jordan was a 6-time NBA champion and also a 6-time NBA Finals MVP. In addition to that, he was also a 5-time MVP of the NBA as far as the regular season goes. He was also a 14-time NBA All-Star and a 3-time MVP of the NBA All-Star Game. And for 10 years, Jordan was the scoring champion in the NBA. In fact, at one time, he was the scoring champion for 7 years straight between 1987 and 1993. Now, this incredible ability to score meant that he ended up averaging 30.1 points per game in an NBA career that lasted for 1,251 games. But still, that's not all. Jordan also won 2 Olympic gold medals playing for Team USA, including the famous Dream Team at the 1992 Olympics, which included legends like Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Charles Barkley. Now, Jordan's fame and success is also translated to fortune off the court. He's got a business empire that's valued at about $3 billion, which of course includes the popular Air Jordan brand. And so if at this point you still don't understand how great this guy is or who he is, maybe you should just go watch his Netflix documentary called The Last Dance. It's pretty good. Now, as you can probably imagine, Michael Jordan's sporting greatness meant that he received a ton of honors and awards during and after his career, including a Presidential Medal of Freedom. But of his many awards, honors, and tributes, there is one that's pretty peculiar, and that's a disease. The backstory for this takes us all the way back to October of 1993, when the whole world was being amazed by Jordan's greatness and what he was doing on the court with the Chicago Bulls. And to be honest, it was pretty hard not to take notice. At the time, Jordan was on absolute fire, and he had just won the NBA championships 3 years in a row with the Chicago Bulls. He was at his peak as an athlete, and he was by far the biggest name in basketball, and maybe even in all sports. And that's when a doctor named Stanford Shulman thought about honoring Michael Jordan in the field of medicine, and of course, in his own unique way. Dr. Shulman was a huge sports and basketball fan, and he was also the chief of infectious diseases at the Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago, where an interesting discovery had just been made. It turns out that around the time when the Chicago Bulls were busy being the best team in basketball and on their way to winning a 3rd straight NBA title, a young girl had been admitted to the Chicago hospital where Dr. Shulman worked with a case of diarrhea and fever. After taking samples, the hospital discovered that the girl was suffering from a salmonella infection. But even though there are thousands of different salmonella strains which have already been discovered, the particular strain of salmonella that the girl was infected with, until that time, had never been identified before. And so it became Dr. Shulman's responsibility as the head of infectious diseases at the hospital to propose a name for the newly discovered strain of salmonella. So think about it. Dr. Shulman was a huge Chicago-based sports fan who, according to some reports, actually had a Michael Jordan poster in his office. The Chicago Bulls had also just won 3 championships in a row. It's called the three-peat in NBA terms, for the first time in their history, by the way. And Jordan was winning the Finals MVP award on all 3 occasions and was also pretty much the best basketball player in the world. As all of this was happening, the newly discovered strain of Salmonella was waiting to be named. Dr. Shulman named the newly discovered and unique bacteria strain after Michael Jordan and decided to call it Salmonella M. Jordan, as a tribute to one of the greatest athletes of all time. Now, before I tell the rest of the story, this is a quick interlude to explain what Salmonella is. Salmonella is a type of bacteria which frequently causes food-related illnesses and is pretty common in the United States, where there are about 1.3 million infections every year. Illness from this bacteria type is officially called salmonellosis, but because that's a bit of a tongue twister, most people simply call it a salmonella infection. But these infections can be pretty bad. They can cause stomach upsets, they can also cause diarrhea and belly cramps. And while most people can shake it off, it actually kills 250 people every year in the US. So translation, you don't want it. Back to the story. Dr. Shulman submitted his proposed name to the board of the official Salmonella naming body based in Paris. Now, it's not clear if the ruling board were in on this or even understood the reference to Michael Jordan at all, but they ultimately reviewed his proposal and approved the name, making Salmonella M. Jordan the official name for that particular strain of bacteria discovered in Chicago. Now, when Dr. Shulman got confirmation that the strain was officially recognized as Salmonella M. Jordan, you'd expect he'd publicize it and tell as many people as possible, essentially saying he's named the disease after Michael Jordan in his own way of paying tribute to Michael Jordan, right? No, he did the opposite. He told nobody. And that's because the naming of the bacteria strain had come at a very interesting time in Michael Jordan's life. At the time, Jordan was actually in the process of opening up a restaurant in Chicago. And so basically, Dr. Shulman loved Jordan so much that he didn't want reports of Jordan's new restaurant and reports of a food-related disease being in the news at the same time, right? But Dr. Shulman eventually had to tell somebody, and he decided to make the grand reveal when Jordan first retired from the NBA in 1993. Naturally, a lot of people thought it was a bit weird to name a disease after an athlete as great as Michael Jordan, or even any athlete at all, right? But Dr. Shulman defended his decision, and this was his argument. He said, looking at this from the perspective of medicine and microbiology, this is a traditional way that people have been honored. In my profession, this was the best tribute I could pay to him. Now to the big question that follows all of this. What exactly did Jordan think about having a disease named after himself? The truth is, we don't know for sure because Michael Jordan himself never actually spoke about it. Perhaps he was busy scoring 1,000 points per game, winning championships and selling Air Jordan sneakers. But we do have an idea what he thought. The official response came from David Falk, who was Michael Jordan's longtime agent. Now, he said, I think if he did it as a tribute, it's a nice tribute. But if you think that's a welcome sign for you, me, or anybody else to name things after Michael Jordan any way we want, then think again. Because David Falk also added, we're hoping to continue to manage the proliferation of Michael Jordan's name and keep it limited to a select group of organizations, whether it be corporate or whether it be charitable. However, what's done is done. And just like the many trophies, sports arenas, or city centers named after great athletes, the strain of bacteria that bears Michael Jordan's name will also last forever. So if you ever find yourself in a hospital diagnosed with a case of salmonellosis, be sure to check if it's the strain that's named after the greatest NBA player of all time, the Salmonella M. Jordan. That's it from me today, guys. If you enjoyed watching this or learned something new, please hit the subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up, and share this with any basketball fans you know. See you next week.